I want you to try a thought experiment with me for a second. Um, Imagine an alien anthropologist lands on Earth today.
Okay.
They step out of their spaceship, and they look around and they see this confusing, chaotic mess of human behavior.
You're a total mess.
But if they looked past the buildings and the cars and uh, just focused on the absolute baseline of our existence, the one thing every single one of us shares, what would they see?
Well, they wouldn't see our job titles or our bank account balances or political affiliations.
Right.
They would see biology. They'd see that every single person on this planet, without exception, arrives here in the exact same state.
Unclothed.
Unclothed, vulnerable, just skin.
Exactly. It's the most universal reality we have. We all start naked.
Yeah.
And yet if that alien looked at how we treat that skin, I think they'd be totally baffled.
Oh, for sure.
Because we have turned this biological baseline into a massive battleground.
It is the ultimate contradiction. I mean, the human body is the most natural thing in existence, and yet we treat it like the most controversial thing in existence.
And that distinction between the biology and the controversy is exactly where we are going today. We are doing a deep dive into the body, the prophet, and the paradox.
A big one.
We've combed through a stack of historical analysis, sociological research, and economic theory to answer a pretty massive question. How did the human body go from being a simple fact of life to being a source of shame, a tool for profit, and a weapon of control?
And the core thesis here is fascinating because it really challenges how we see ourselves every single time we look in a mirror.
Yeah.
The argument from our sources is that nudity itself, just the physical state of not wearing clothes, is neutral. It's biological.
Right.
But clothing is cultural. Therefore, the controversy never comes from the skin itself. It comes entirely from the social structure that is staring at it.
So the mission for this deep dive is to look at structure, not skin. We are going to explore how the exact same human body has been treated as everything from sacred to sinful, profitable to disposable.
All depending on the organizing logic of the society around it. We'll see that the body is basically a canvas onto which society projects its values.
And here is where it gets really interesting and honestly a little infuriating.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack the paradox of profit. Like, why is it that modern society shames nudity in public life, acting like it's a huge moral failing, but then turns around and monetizes it in private industries to the tune of billions of dollars?
It's a wild double standard.
How did we get to this weird place where a wardrobe malfunction is a national crisis, but sex sells everything from burgers to cars?
To understand that, we really have to look backward. We need to establish a historical baseline.
Let's do it.
Because we tend to think our current way of viewing the body is the correct or civilized way. But history tells a very different story.
Okay, so let's unpack this baseline.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us assume that being covered up is just the default setting for humanity.
Right.
Like, cavemen were naked because they didn't know any better, and then we got smart and put on pants.
Exactly.
But the sources point to ancient Greece as a major counterexample to that.
Absolutely. And we aren't talking about primitive ignorance here. We are talking about a highly sophisticated philosophical choice.
Okay.
If you look at classical Greece, their perspective was radically different from our modern view. In that society, nudity wasn't hiding anything. It actually symbolized harmony, strength, and aesthetic virtue.
Wait, so when we see those statues of Greek gods or athletes and they're totally nude, that wasn't just an artistic choice.
Yeah?
It wasn't just the sculptor trying to save money on carving robes.
No, not at all. It was a firm philosophical stance. The Greeks had this concept where physical transparency equated to moral transparency.
Oh, wow.
Male athletes, for instance, trained and competed nude. The word gymnasium actually comes from the Greek word gymnos, which literally means naked.
Are you serious?
Completely. So a gym was just a place to be naked and exercise.
That puts a whole new spin on my Planet Fitness membership.
Yeah, I wouldn't try that there today.
But seriously, the key here is that it wasn't sexual rights.
Exactly. That is the distinction we really struggle with today. We see skin and we immediately think sex.
Right.
They saw skin and thought discipline. If you were fit, well-groomed, and carried yourself with confidence while nude, it proved you had nothing to hide regarding your character. It was about divine alignment.
It's almost like a proof of work for your character. Like if you're hiding your body, you must be hiding a flaw.
Precisely. In fact, in that era, it was the non-Greeks, the quote-unquote barbarians, who were considered shameful because they covered themselves up.
That is wild.
The Greeks thought, what are they hiding? Why are they so ashamed of the human form? Sculptors use nudity to emphasize ideal form and human excellence.
That is a complete 180 from how we think now.
It is.
But Greece is just one example. The sources also talk about global indigenous cultures and how they approach this. Were that the same philosophical nudity, or was it something else entirely?
It was different. This is where we see the profound influence of environment. In many indigenous cultures, specifically those in warmer climates, minimal clothing wasn't a philosophical statement so much as a practical reality.
Makes sense.
It was an adaptation to the climate and the need for the body to be integrated into nature.
So less about displaying virtue and more about just living in the heat.
Exactly. And in these systems, clothing as we know it, meaning something used specifically to conceal, wasn't the priority at all. Instead, they focused heavily on ornamentation.
Okay, distinguish that for me. What is the difference between clothing and ornamentation?
Clothing hides. Ornamentation signals.
Ah.
You wear jewelry, tattoos, body paint, or specific belts to signal your status or your tribe or your achievements. You aren't covering your shame. You are broadcasting your identity.
That is the nugget that really stuck out to me in the sources. In those cultures, nudity wasn't an act of rebellion. It was just normalcy.
Yes.
It was just Tuesday.
And because it was normal, sexualization was context-based, not automatic. This is a concept the sources stress heavily. Just seeing a breast or a thigh didn't trigger a sexual or moral crisis because the shame conditioning around anatomy was minimal.
Because you saw it every day.
Exactly. The shock value simply didn't exist because it was part of daily life. Cooking, hunting, child rearing.
So if that is the baseline, where nudity is either virtuous or just practical, how on earth did we get to where we are now?
That is the big question.
Where a breastfeeding mother is asked to leave a restaurant, but we have billboards of half-naked models selling perfume right outside.
Well, this brings us to the structural shift. The sources distinguish between two massive organizing logics that shifted human history: matriarchy and patriarchy.
Okay, before we dive in, we need to clarify something because these terms get thrown around a lot on the internet and they can be pretty loaded.
Yes, very important distinction. The source makes it clear this is not about individual men versus individual women. We aren't talking about your dad or your neighbor Bob.
Right, we're staying objective here.
We are talking about systemic orientation. It is about how a society organizes its power, its resources, and crucially, its lineage.
Got it. So let's start with the matriarchal logic. How does that system view the body?
A matriarchal structure centers on relational stability and communal continuity. In this worldview, the body is viewed as life-giving and cyclical. It is deeply connected to the land.
Cyclical meaning what? Like the season?
So it's the seasons, the moon, the harvest. The body bleeds, it births, it feeds, it returns to the earth.
Okay.
In this system, the shame factor is minimal because embodiment isn't framed as a threat to the system. Nudity isn't dirty, it is the vessel of life. It is part of the ecosystem.
Okay, contrast that with the patriarchal logic, because this seems to be where the major shift happens.
Patriarchal logic centers on hierarchy and crucially lineage control. It introduces linear time and property ownership.
Okay.
Under this system, the body shifts from being an ecosystem to being an asset to manage.
An asset to manage. That sounds incredibly cold. Like we were talking about a portfolio, not a person.
It is economic logic applied directly to biology. Specifically, female bodies become sites of lineage control.
Because of inheritance.
Yes. You have to ensure that the offspring belong to the patriarch to maintain the hierarchy and the inheritance. Therefore, visibility has to be managed.
So under this logic, nudity stops being nature and starts being what? A liability.
It becomes a security breach.
Wow.
It becomes associated with temptation or danger. It becomes a literal threat to the established order. If the body is an asset, then unauthorized access or even unauthorized viewing is a form of theft.
That makes so much sense of why we have so many rules about who can wear what and where. It's not just about morality, it is about control.
It is. In matriarchal logic, the body is part of the ecosystem. In patriarchal logic, the body is private property.
And that leads us directly into the modern era. Because we aren't just living in a patriarchy, we are living in a hyper-capitalist society. And the source calls this the patriarchal capitalist hybrid.
This is where the plot thickens. We enter the economic paradox.
The paradox of profit. This is the thing I teased at the beginning. We have this society that publicly shames nudity, but privately, it is hyper-profitable.
It's a mechanism of extracting value. The source argues that desire is manufactured for profit, but so is insecurity.
Oh, yeah.
Insecurity is incredibly economically useful.
Absolutely. If I feel bad about my body, I buy things to fix it.
Hmm.
If I feel shame, I buy things to cover it.
Exactly. If you are perfectly happy with your naked body, if you think you look fine and feel comfortable, you are a terrible consumer.
You're not buying anything.
Right. You don't need the Spanx, the cream, or the diet app. But if the system can convince you that your natural body is flawed or shameful, you will spend a lifetime trying to fix it.
So we shame nudity to create insecurity.
Hmm.
But at the same time, and this is the paradox, we use nudity to sell things.
That is the extraction of value. The system uses the body to sell products. So you have this massive double standard where a woman, for example, is encouraged to be attractive because that creates value. But she is criticized if she is too visible or displays that body freely without a commercial context.
It's a tightrope walk, right? You can be empowered if you're monetizing your nudity in a very specific, controlled way, like a pop star or a model.
Exactly.
But if you're just existing nude, sunbathing in your backyard, or breastfeeding, you're immoral.
She is celebrated for beauty but blamed for harassment. The instability is systemic. The body is treated as a product where value is extracted from both the desire for the body and the shame surrounding the body.
That is exhausting. Just hearing it explained structurally, that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. It feels like we are trapped in a game where the rules change depending on who's making money.
It should feel exhausting. The source points out the contradiction is structural, not moral. It is not that we are confused people. It is that the system relies on this confusion to function.
It keeps us off balance.
It creates a fragmented sense of self. We learn to view our own bodies from the outside as objects to be judged rather than from the inside as vessels to be lived in.
So let's pivot, because I think if you're listening to this right now, you might be thinking, okay, the system is rigged, but what does this mean for me? Why should I care about body neutrality?
This is the why it matters portion. When we stop viewing the body as a product or a source of sin and we just view it biologically, there are actual psychological benefits.
One of the things that stood out to me was the equality effect.
This is powerful. Think about it. Clothing signals status. It tells you someone's class, their profession, their hierarchy in the world.
Yep.
A suit says one thing, a uniform says another, rags say another. We size people up in 3 seconds based on what they are wearing.
Right. But if you take that away,
nudity temporarily removes those markers. It creates a baseline equality. You are just a human interacting with another human. It strips away the social armor. It forces you to connect eye to eye rather than label to label.
there is also the physical aspect. The source mentioned nervous system regulation. This one really surprised me.
Yes. Private nudity, just being unclothed in your own space, allows for what's called proprioceptive grounding. It is about airflow, temperature variation, and sensory input.
Meaning what in plain English?
Meaning you literally feel the air on your skin.
Yeah.
You feel the texture of the chair. It grounds you in physical reality rather than being trapped in your head.
It's physical mindfulness.
Exactly. It tells your brain, I am here, I am safe, I am real.
And here's a counterintuitive one: reducing hypersexualization. You would think that more nudity equals more obsession, right? That if we normalize this, everyone would just go crazy.
That is the fear-based assumption we have been trained to believe. But the expert analysis in the sources suggests the complete opposite.
Really?
When nudity is common, when it is normalized, obsession often decreases. It becomes mundane.
It becomes like the indigenous context we talked about earlier. Just a knee is a knee.
Just a knee. If you see it every day, it loses that forbidden fruit quality. The sources argue that by hiding the body, we have actually hypercharged it with sexual meaning that it wouldn't naturally have.
And then there is shame reconditioning.
This is crucial for anyone struggling with body image. Shame is learned through punishment. If you remove the punitive response, if you are nude and nothing bad happens and no one scolds you, you rewire that neural pathway.
You're teaching your brain that your body is safe.
Yes.
I love that idea. Rewiring the brain just by existing comfortably.
Yeah.
But here we have to talk about safety. Because we don't live in that utopia yet.
We absolutely cannot be naive here. The source explicitly warns that nudity does not automatically create safety, just as being clothed doesn't automatically create dignity.
Right. You can't just walk out the door today and say, I'm reclaiming my sovereignty and expect the world to play along.
Yeah.
The world is still operating on that patriarchal capitalist logic.
No. Sovereignty and agency require context. True empowerment requires environmental safety, legal awareness, and clear boundaries.
And an informed consent culture.
That is the keystone. Without a culture of consent, nudity, or even just style of dress can be exploited. So when we talk about this, we are talking about the need for a safe structure.
So let's imagine that structure for a second. The source paints a picture of a utopian vision or a mature society. What does that actually look like?
In a mature society, consent would govern interaction. That is the fundamental rule. Nudity would become just one expression among many.
So it wouldn't be scandalous.
No. It would be optional, neutral, and not fear-based. If someone chose to be nude in an appropriate setting, it would be a headline.
Right.
And if someone chose to cover up, it wouldn't be judged as prudish. The projection of danger or sin onto the body would dissolve because the system no longer needs those levers to control people.
That is a beautiful thought. That the fear-based interpretation just dissolves.
It connects back to the very beginning in our conversation. The body is biological, meaning is cultural, controversy is structural.
So when we see a scandal about a celebrity's outfit or we feel shame about our own bodies at the beach.
We need to remember the body remains constant. It is only our projection that changes. The shame you feel isn't yours. It is a product of the system you are in.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The core question isn't, is nudity good or bad? That is way too simple.
The real question is, does the system surrounding the body encourage sovereignty or does it encourage control?
And I think the final provocative thought here is that true empowerment isn't just about exposure. It is not about taking your clothes off and calling it a revolution.
True empowerment is about having agency. It is about being able to make a choice within a safe, conscious structure.
Exactly.
It is the freedom to define your body for yourself, whether that means covering it from head to toe or bearing it all, rather than letting the market or the patriarchy define it for you.
It is about looking in the mirror and seeing a human, not an asset.
Yeah.
And that is something worth thinking about the next time you get dressed or undressed. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.